Hello, Reformed mythologist Nate Morgan-Locke here with another video about Sleep Token. That's right, I made a video about Sleep Token's Even in Arcadia song from the album of the same name, and I was trying to draw some parallels between the lyrics of that song and the Bible. It's been fascinating to see how much uptake there has been on that video, and particularly how many comments there have been made about the nature and lore and existence and excitement around Sleep Token, the band. So in this video, I want to dive into some of the comments and try to answer some of the big questions. What exactly is the lore of Sleep Token? Are Sleep Token secretly a Christian band? If you listen to Sleep Token music and like it, can you really call yourself a follower of Jesus? Anyway, there are some of the questions I want to dive into, but to answer them, I will be using the comments under the last video because I like to have it as a conversation, a sort of social media, if you will. Anyway, let's dive in with some comments on the worship of sleep. Well, here's someone putting it succinctly. They worship a deity called sleep and make out with each other on stage. Nothing Christian about this band. Someone else said, the entire myth is, and lore is, about the singer Vessel being in communion with a deity of the night called Sleep. No wonder you can find things that transpose onto Christianity. It's an entire concept piece about a deeply troubling and abusive relationship that Vessel has with a god that is unrequited. I don't think this is a video you should have made, especially to espouse its links to Christianity. Kinda tell me you don't understand Sleep Token without telling me. Well, I'm trying to learn about Sleep Token. That's the whole point of sort of exploring it. This is what Graceful Calvinist says. Sleep Token presents themselves as a band dedicated to worshipping an ancient deity named Sleep. The band's lore suggests that the deity appeared to the singer Vessel and promised him glory and magnificence in return for following him. Sleep Token's music, performance, and visuals are all interpreted as offerings to this deity. That's an interesting concept. So to say anything they put out is Christian is a literal twisting of God's word on Sleep Token's part. I have no doubt that Vessel knows at least some biblical truths, which is why these lines appear in his music. I love the music, but I take zero heart in anything they say referring to Jesus or that they ever point to Jesus. Simply knowing who they openly worship can tell you loads. Lily Bell PJJ Lee said, great video. Thanks for that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on their overarching catalogue. And then jumping down, to me, if you are to incorporate the lore Vessel expressed, then the whole discography is a story about false idolatry and how it doesn't pay off. Because even though the band made it big now, things are not good. He's still stuck in the loop of despair. That's very sad to hear. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. I just woke up and can't quite words yet. Well, thank you nonetheless for your comment. Okay, I hope you're ready now for a big long bit of lore. Here it comes from @deadrabbit with an X instead of the A. So, just for some context, Sleep Token themselves are not Christian as far as I know, as people or a band. They just frequently use Christian tropes and recognizable concepts as fuel for their lyricism. I like that phrase. The story behind their music is based on religion, however, just one that they have created for the lore. They worship a god by the name of Sleep, hence the reason why the band is called Sleep Token and the band members are called Vessels. Our frontman, Vessel, he started his journey by just worshipping Sleep, singing, "The night does not belong to God." As the story progresses, he becomes closer to Sleep, to the point where he actually becomes intimate with her. But she is just using him. She wants to claim his soul, but he's so enamored by her that he doesn't realize that's what she wants. He's so infatuated that he genuinely believes she is in love with him too. She whispers sweet nothings to him, i.e. give, are you really okay, and provide. He falls right into her trap though before he realizes it's actually too late. He knows it's too late to turn back, but at first he is fine with all that. All he wants is her, i.e. say that you will, blood, sport, fall for me, missing limbs. At some point though, he finally realizes what she is actually doing to him and tries to find a way out, but ends up falling for her again, i.e. chokehold, aqua regia, and telomeres. I don't think I pronounced that correctly either. Anyway, at some point he just ends up trying everything he can to rip himself from her clutches, i.e. Ascensionism, DYWYLM, Take Me Back to Eden, and Euclid. Even in Arcadia as an album is him finally being free from her temptations, remembering all of the trauma she caused him and making it to the heavens, known as Arcadia in the lore, so he can finally end what he started by killing her and finding favor with the rest of the gods. That is a tour de force. Dead rabbit with an X instead of an A. Yeah, wow, that's a lot to unpack. I mean, definitely this idea that there's a conversation happening between Sleep, the god or goddess, and Vessel as her kind of, worshipper in relationship. That seemed like pretty strong within the lore. Also sounds quite sad and kind of abusive and not very healthy. Anyway, we continue. There were lots of conversations in the comments section where people were commenting under each other's responses. And I quite like to see that. Nice to see everyone playing well together. So that's the kind of thing we want here at Reform Mythologists, is some good, friendly chat. So here's one of those little comment threads. Respite of Champions said, the whole story of this album, which is now the first chapter in the second trilogy of albums that I hope we will be getting, is that now Vessel, the vocalist, has to be taken back to Eden from the end of the last trilogy. He has ascended, strong biblical vibes there. In some sense, he has gotten free of Sleep, the demon that he has been in service to for years, and has made it to Arcadia, to Eden, to paradise. That's similar to what I was saying last time. But just as the snake was lurking in Eden, he finds Sleep, and her brood lurking around here in paradise as well. So now this whole album was essentially him coming to terms with the fact that now he must fight these gods he thought were dying. What a great comment. And then Red-Eyed Redneck, with no C, said, so blasphemy. Another response came back to that to say, not at all, ? And then came Grim Darkly, which I believe is a reference to Warhammer 40k. Hey. Is that right? I'm pretty loose on the lore there too, but I think it's all happening in the Grim Dark. Who said, I'm in no way advocating that Sleep Token is a Christian band, but if we humour the idea that their lyrics could have biblical parallels for the sake of this argument, why would it be intrinsically blasphemous? That's a good point. It describes demons, a god, a quote-unquote heaven, all of which are fictional and exist in a lore and universe created by the band. How is this any more blasphemous than Lewis's Narnia or Tolkien's Middle-earth? Very interesting point. Both of which are revered as masterclass works in Christian metaphorical storytelling. Also, both of them include things that by your definition would be blasphemous. Narnia has a witch, black magic, demonic blood sacrifices. Lord of the Rings has wizards, black magic, ghosts, undead, literal fire demons, etc. Yet not considered blasphemy. I think there is a bit of a distinction there. But he goes on. Fictional parallel concept or metaphorical storytelling is powerful and effective at communicating spiritual struggles and even Christian experiences with people who don't understand the source material. Yes! Now, let me just qualify. I think there is a bit of a difference between a fantasy land that you write as a story, okay, in a book, like the Narnia Chronicles, the Narniad, or the Lord of the Rings, and this in-person event of the going to a gig. So it feels like there's a little bit of a different thing there. We could say, okay, it's all theatre, right? They're a very theatrical band. They cover themselves in masks and makeup and all sorts of stuff. So there's a ritualistic element to that, and maybe everyone just knows that they're kind of playing along and you're not supposed to take it too seriously. But it does feel that the participation level is slightly different. And I think that's just one caveat I would just want to make on Grim Darkly's comment, even though I do think it's a solid comment. And other people agreed. They said stuff like, love this, agree, thank you. Lots of love in the comments. Nice to see people chatting along nicely. But there is some disagreement. People have different perspectives on this. It doesn't mean to say that every perspective on this is correct or true or right, but particularly when it comes to media consumption, it's optional. You don't have to listen to Sleep Token. And particularly if you're a Christian and you feel that this is a bad idea for you, you will want to avoid it. This is the argument from several people. One who says they are far from Christian and have occult symbolism. Mark and avoid all costs. Leroy Jenkins! I believe that is a reference to someone playing a video game and he just goes in, shoots everyone, shouts his name out loudly. Leroy Jenkins! He says, care to comment on the demonic/satanic elements of a few of their songs? Glory to the Legion equals Legion refers to a large group of demons. That's right. You can read about those in Mark's Gospel. I think it's chapter 5. Jesus goes over to the region of the Gadarenes. Is that right? We can look it up. Also, in the song Look to Windward, it says, I am the demon of Sodom and Gomorrah. Right? I am the blood of an angel, the fate of the fallen. Nobody knows where I came from. Those are the only satanic/demonic references that I am fully aware of in their music. Now, it might be another interesting video to do and to say, right, let's stack up all the references to biblical demons and satanic work and then sort of weigh them up, and that might be a way to do it. I do think, though, that the lore is, or the storytelling, the mythos, is the way to kind of address that. But it's a fair point. Filmstar562Z says, Christians should definitely not be listening to this band. I don't know. When I see sigils and hear the things that Vessel talks about and how each concert is worship and a ritual, I have to take a step back and realize there's some witchcraft/dark magic going on here. Anytime you see sigil magic, you can never be sure of the worker's intent. I'm not sure what that means, but anyway, so I really don't think Christians should be messing with Sleep Token. Now, I think that's a very fair point. I think you can make the point that should Christians engage with this stuff or not, and clearly Filmstar562Z thinks not. But there are quite a number of Christians who have outed themselves as Sleep Token fans in this comment thread. Not least of all is a good friend of mine by the name of @Stephen McCaskill. He makes incredibly good documentaries, mostly about church history, but currently about missionary work. So you definitely want to check out his stuff. He said, big Sleep Token fan and love the connections you're pulling out from the lyrics. Fire emoji. Other Christians who like Sleep Token include Brandon Radosevich, 6989. Look to Windward specifically says he is the god of the gaps, the demon of Sodom, the blood of an angel. There is so many specific Christian themes. I like to think of emergence as a rebirth. As a born-again Christian, I cried multiple times when listening to the song as I had just found my way back to Jesus. Well, praise the Lord for you, Brandon, as a brother coming back to Jesus. I appreciate your scriptural fidelity and how you can see the references and implications of some lyrics. In your case, I say, to the pure, all things are pure, and the presence of God in your heart looks for him in all before you. I love that comment, Ralph Gove. I'm a mega fan of the band for 2 years now. A former pastor, just not in that role now. I do not believe they are Christian. They are highly educated and exquisite artists. I do pray the reality of his person can be found and formed in them. I enjoyed your video. Well, thank you very much for coming along, and thanks for leaving a comment. Drew Fensler, 58, said, I was struggling to love this song. It's beautiful, but it seemed like a shot at Jesus. Sleep Token sounds like a man struggling with the truth. That's actually a pretty good way of putting it. You help me find a way to truly enjoy this work. I pray that he finds the truths he so desperately, beautifully writes about. Great comment. And there's Country Redhead 84. I wish I could love this comment. Why didn't you love this comment then? Apparently only the person who made the video could love comments. I should have loved it on your behalf, Country Redhead 84. And maybe I'll go and do that now. And then Ryan Weaver 7337. This has got a good recommendation in it. Depending on how deep this band's incredible lore and storytelling you're willing to go, I think you'll find a much deeper connection to Christianity within Sleep Token's music than what you've already found here. I also find their lore to be strikingly similar to C.S. Lewis's Till We Have Faces. It was kind of funny because they don't show their faces. I'm a huge fan of theirs, a Christian former minister, and their music absolutely changed my life. Regardless of the band's personal beliefs, the Lord used it to help me deal with a bunch of issues in my personal life. Well, the Lord works in his mysterious ways, and I'm glad that he's brought you closer to himself and that Jesus is shining more brightly in your heart. Here's a couple more that we just liked, and then I'm going to get into some people who really misunderstood what I was trying to say in the video, and then someone who absolutely smashed it. So here's one I particularly liked, which was at BrotherGas1260. The prayer list never gets shorter, folks. Buckle up, y'all. Here's a couple of people who misunderstood the video, and I think the reason they misunderstood the video was probably because they weren't paying much attention to it, and that's all we ask. But this was funny, so I have included it because it was a funny comment. At Jesus Fried Christ, Vessel uses mythological reference, yes, but it's not exclusive to one mythology. Arcadia is not Christian, it's Greek. He's not religious, he's just using references as allegory to make the point he's trying to make in his songs, which are about love and toxic relationship he had, and even a suicide attempt he went through. See Atlantic. And then here's the jokey bit, which genuinely, this is funny. He also uses biting teeth and oceanic references as well. That doesn't make him a dentist or an oceanographer. Call you Stretch Armstrong, because you're really reaching with this. Very witty. For those of you who don't know who Stretch Armstrong is.
Yes, Stretch Armstrong. Now stretching fun as far as it will go. He bends, he stretches, he even ties in knots.
But I kind of said that in the video. I kind of said, look, I might be overreaching here, and I'm not saying they're actually a Christian band. I'm just trying to say that there are lots of parallels that are being drawn with Christian things. And that, for me, is interesting and why I wanted to explore it. It doesn't make him a dentist or an oceanographer. You're right. It doesn't. I'm not saying they are actually a Christian band. I just want you to be clear on that. Here's someone who did understand the assignment. His name is at Nick Renwick, and this guy takes us on a story. He says, at first I was like, what the H is this guy on about? Then I kept listening. Even if it's not intentional by Sleep Token, it really does, as you illustrate, express deeply underlying Christian undertones. This is a lovely commentary on what someone, perhaps subtly influenced by our UK's Christian-rooted culture, might subconsciously or even overtly weave into the earnest musical artistry. So Nick Renwick has been on a little bit of a journey there. At first, he was like, I don't understand this, but then he kept on listening. And that's really all we're asking you to do on Reformed Mythology, is just pay a bit more attention to the media you consume. And particularly, as he references this, it could be that Sleep Token is subtly influenced by our UK's Christian-rooted culture. And I do think that's an important part of the lore of the band. They are from the UK, and everywhere in the UK is kind of, dripping with Christianity. The laws of this country, the history of this country has deep, deep Christian roots. And when someone sort of recognizes that and then approaches the Christian scriptures, they will discover that there is an awful lot of stuff to explore, that a lot of stuff to play with, awful lot of mythic material from which to kind of weave their own lore and storytelling. So anyway, that's me learning the lore from the comments under this video. Thank you so much to everyone who left a comment, because it's just really helpful for me, firstly, to know that people are watching the videos and enjoying them, but then also to go into this idea that we can have a conversation about the lore. So in terms of my perspective on this lore of Sleep Token, there's lots that I like about a band that comes with a strong and deep mythic background to what they're trying to do. There is storytelling woven through multiple albums, and that there are recurrent characters, and that there is a deep narrative that is underpinning what's going on, and that as fans you get to kind of explore that. I also really like the theatricality. The challenge I find with the mythos they're presenting is that it does seem, as some people have pointed out, it seems tragic. It's got a never-ending gloom to it. It can't break out. There's no real hope. There can't be a happy ending. And that's potentially, if you bring your own circumstances to this music, that you will find you're comforted by the fact that other people have gone through similar tragic experiences. In one sense, it's a good thing, right? Someone who can empathize with you, someone who can connect with you, someone who says, I've been through this and hopefully I can help you. But the help you thing, that's the important part. Because if you're down at the bottom of a pit and you're struggling with life, and then someone else just comes to join you at the bottom of the pit, okay, it's nice to have company, but now we've got two people at the bottom of a pit. And what I want to commend is a better mythology, a better story, a better narrative, a genuine gospel. You need, in a way, to bring the scriptural spectacles to bear on this body of work, so that you will now genuinely be able to see that it is pointed towards something that is far better, far more hopeful, far more optimistic, and far more true. Anyway, I think that's about it for now. Please do remember that media consumption is optional. You are under no obligation to listen to a band who worship a deity called sleep and make out with each other on stage. I'm Reformed mythologist Nate Morgan Locke. I'm glad you were here.